Hey everyone, I'm Schleim, and I like movies, believe it or not. Love them, actually. The idea of being transported into another world with such realistic characters, setting, and a great story has enamored me, and always will. Some of my favorite movies, like Lord of the Rings, Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, put you right there into the story with such deep characterization, brilliant setting, and a great story that will entertain the audience for decades or sometimes centuries on end. However, what I like about movies is that it can teach you something about the world and explore themes that might be important to you. The Lord of the Rings explores themes of friendship, loyalty, the idea of heroism, and a whole lot more because it is a big story. Back to the Future explores themes of regret, fear, and greed with the character of Biff Tannen, and in my favorite movie, 2006's smash hit Click, starring Adam Sandler, its themes revolve around heavier topics of escapism, work-life balance, and the idea of second chances or redemption. As you can see, all of my favorite movies don't just have a story to tell, they have a theme to push alongside it. And that's why I don't just love movies, but stories overall. Yeah, sure, there will be an amazing story, but without the character going through struggles, what's even the point? And the movie or story that I think does this best, in my opinion, is none other than Edgar Wright's commercial failure based on the comics by Brian Lee O'Malley, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
We are Sex Bomb, and we're here to make you think about death and get sad and stuff!
Okay, now when I say it was a commercial failure, I mean it was just a commercial failure. But if it was such a good movie, and even the Schleim9K likes it, how could it have possibly not been a smash hit at the box office? Well, let's see. Number 1. The movie's pop culture style would have limited the target demographic for the movie, therefore limiting the number of people who would actually see it. Number 2. You know what other movies came out in 2010? 2 Leonardo DiCaprio movies, Shutter Island and fucking Inception, Twilight Eclipse, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and Grown Ups. So yeah, Scott Pilgrim had some competition. Number 3, the marketing was abysmal. The original trailer for the movie was absolutely terrible, and I honestly don't know why they went with that to market it. But I like the main poster for the movie, so that's a plus, I guess? All of these combined into this, a $49 million box office performance over a budget of $85 million. However, just because the performance of the movie was bad doesn't mean the movie was terrible overall. The movie in its own right was incredible. Amazing soundtrack, cast, and Edgar Wright is the director, creator of Shaun of the Dead and Baby Driver starring a pedophile. The movie has gained a cult following over time, which I'm a part of. However, what I like the most about the movie is that the main character, Scott Pilgrim, the person that the movie is trying to make you like, is a complete asshole. He's one of the worst people in the story. He's self-centered, childishly immature, lazy, dishonest, and objectifying. However, despite all of this, the viewers and readers still root for Scott, because the point of the story isn't to see a good person do good things. It's to see a flawed young adult navigate through life and use his mistakes to grow and become a better person over time. So, let me show you how that was achieved in one of the best stories of all time, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Okay, so originally this was going to be an analysis on the entire story of Scott Pilgrim, so that includes the 6 books, but that turned out to be a lot longer than I thought it would take. I had about 4,000 words and I wasn't even on like the 5th page of the book, of the first book, mind you. So yeah, you can see that I was going to do that on my twitter.com, which you should follow, by the way, link in the description. But yeah, it turned out to be way too long, so this is just going to be an analysis of the movie. I might do the entire book series at a later date because the story of Scott Pilgrim is something really cool and I want to talk about it. But yes, this is just going to be the movie. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you liked the video. And also, I know this is not going to be one full video. This is going to be split up into parts because it's way too long for me to do in 1 month when I'm also going to college and learning stuff, and also I have a job. So please subscribe if you want to see part 2. It should be coming out either next month or the month afterwards. I don't really know. I'm kind of like drifting along through this whole YouTube thing. So yeah, thank you for watching, and let's start the analysis. Let's go. Woo! It opens with an 8-bit rendition of the Universal Pictures intro. Pretty nice, and sets the viewer up to know that this movie will feature a lot of pop culture references, which it does. For the first scene, it opens with this.
Not so long ago, in the mysterious land of Toronto, Canada, Scott Pilgrim was dating a high schooler.
Scott Pilgrim is dating a high schooler?
This opening scene, transitioning to the title sequence, is so incredibly well made, showing the viewers the characters' personalities in a mere 5 minutes. We meet Scott Pilgrim, Stephen Stills, Kim Pine, young Neil, and Knives Chau. The whole point of this scene is to set up Act 1 and to introduce the main characters and their personalities. Scott Pilgrim, easily distracted by his surroundings, even when asked questions by his peers. Content with the quote-unquote relationship that he has with his 17-year-old girlfriend, Knives Chau. He dodges questions which criticize his tendency to get himself into problematic scenarios, which Kim Pine does by saying,
Well, aren't you pleased as punch?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Speaking of Kim Pine, cynical and sarcastic, with a zero-tolerance policy on Scott's behavior, or lack of it. Quick to call him out or criticize him for it, but you'll see later in the movie that it's out of care and some love, but you only see that love pit in the comics. In the opening scene, you actually see this dynamic between Scott and Kim unfold, but rather subtly with the Pleased as Punch segment. Kim criticizes Scott by saying he seems rather happy about getting back into relationships. She's being sarcastic as she knows Scott's tendency to unknowingly get into problematic situations, especially with girls. She says that line in a sarcastic manner to call out that Scott hasn't actually thought this relationship through properly. Scott merely pretends to not understand, basically dodging the criticism to get out of the uncomfortable situation. Stephen Stills, the talent, responsible and level-headed, for the most part at least, focused solely on getting the band he started off the ground. He's a little more lenient on Scott's actions and openly supporting of him, unless he's flaking band practice, that is. This can be seen with Stephen asking Scott about his new girlfriend, not concerned if it's a good decision for him, as Stephen knows that Scott will somehow fix it if the situation goes awry. Another thing, why is no one actually talking about the 6-year age gap between Scott and young Neil? Very much a blank slate. Neil plays a very minor role in the movie, and the director Edgar Wright shows that by giving young Neil little to no character development, or any personality to begin with. The shirt he's wearing in this scene also shows it. 3 blank boxes representing a comic panel, symbolizing his blank slate characterization. And finally, Knives Chau. At first shy, naive, but starts to show off her energetic and enthusiastic side when she sees Scott, played Launchpad McQuack, at the Sex Bomb band practice, and becomes absolutely enamored with both Scott and his band, constantly saying,
I mean, I know of kids that play piano or whatever, but you guys rock.
Well, I knew I personally rocked, but I never suspected that we rocked as a unit. So thank you, Knives.
She has some issues. For example, she thinks negatively of herself quite a bit, and Scott doesn't really help with that. Not purposefully though. This can be viewed in the shot where she's first introduced.
Hi.
You promise to be good?
Of course I'll be good.
Seriously, please be good.
Am I really not?
Scott is, well, in his way, asking Knives to be more mature because he doesn't want to be more embarrassed than he already is dating someone 5 years younger than him in front of his friends. But obviously that's not how it'd be perceived by literally anyone other than him. The title sequence is incredible, with Launchpad McQuack, also known as We Are Sex Bomb in the official soundtrack, playing in the background, with the band's genre being more of a disorganized and messy garage rock, with Kim playing on drums, Scott playing on bass, and Stephen playing lead guitar and vocals. Watch as the pop-up graphics of lightning symbolize the energy of the trio playing. The slow zooming camera shows the juxtaposition between Knives and Neil. This is Knives' first time listening to this type of music due to her strict family, which isn't actually seen in the movie, and her attendance at a Catholic high school. Her face has a look of awe and enthusiasm, her mouth slightly agape, and her eyes, quite literally, sparkle like stars. However, in contrast to, and right next to Knives, Neil has to deal with this almost every day, so he's accustomed to their sound and most likely knows that they suck. He isn't engaged. Sure, he may enjoy the sound, but is not as massive of a fan as Knives is. This one scene, more importantly this shot, sets up her obsession with both Scott and the band. As the credits roll, you see the visual cues at the characters the cast is playing. 4 lines symbolize the 4 strings on a bass guitar. Michael CERA plays Scott Pilgrim, who plays bass for Sex Bob-omb. The pink to blue to green represents the different hair colors that Ramona Flowers has throughout the movie, going from hot pink to dark blue to toxic green. The colors also represent the 3 golden goddesses in the Legend of Zelda series. Pink is Din, blue is Nehru, and green is Furore. A battery draining for Kieran Culkin's Wallace Wells probably symbolizes how he's always on his phone and texting Scott's sister, Stacy. I can't really think of anything else for that, so that's probably it. Chris Evans plays the second Evil X, who skates, therefore a skateboard and 2 X's, plus the Roman numeral for 2 is shown. Nothing for Anna Kendrick, which is kinda funny. Brie Larson plays Scott's ex, Natalie Envy Adams, so a heart which splits in 2 is shown. The Sex Bob-omb logo, plus a count from 1 to 4, represents Alison Pill's character, Kim Pine. Aubrey Plaza has black bars appearing around the screen, representing the crassness of her character, Julie Powers. Brandon Routh has 3 X's and a guitar, since he's both the bass player for the band The Clash at Demon Head and the 3rd Evil X. Jason Schwartzman plays the final boss, G-Man, reference to Half-Life's G-Man, or Gideon, with his logo shown being that of an upside-down Triforce with stylized triangles turned into Gs, which also symbolizes his love for pyramids whilst showing the video game representation and aesthetic the movie is trying to show off, with 7 X's quickly appearing and disappearing individually to show Gideon is the 7th and final Evil X. 3 white boxes for Johnny Simmons, representing young Neil's shirt in the opening scene of the movie. Mark Webber has a guitar, representing Steven Still's role of lead guitar in his band. Mae Whitman plays Ramona's 4th Evil X, Roxy Richter. The 4 X's lined up both represent her as the 4th Evil X and also how she's a lesbian. 2 X chromosomes next to each other, meaning 2 women. The shape of a razor blade also flashes up, representing her weapon of choice, a whip made out of razor blades which Roxy also uses as a stylish belt. Ellen Wong plays Scott's 17-year-old girlfriend turned ex, Knives Chau. Her main and unsurprising choice of weapon, 2 knives that look like sais show up, crossing each other over to make an X, representing how she's one of Scott's Evil X's. It's important to know that while the sai is known as a Japanese dagger-like weapon, which therefore makes an odd choice to make that the main weapon for a Chinese character unless the director and film crew are ethnically intolerant. The history of the sai can be traced back to other parts of southern Asia before making its way over to Okinawa, Japan, where it was and still is used in martial arts, primarily in ninjutsu and kobudo. I hope I pronounced that right. The Chinese have used similar weapons to sais for millennia, so the use of a Japanese sai for representation of a Chinese character is fine. But more importantly, Knives doesn't even use sais in the movie. Sure, she uses them in the books, but for the film adaptation, Knives uses, more appropriately, 2 butterfly swords, which is a traditional southern Chinese sword. So why the sais for the title sequence? I don't know. That's all the main ones that I could be bothered to look at. If you want to look at the brilliance of this title sequence for yourself, watch the movie. I'm not going to do it all for you. Anyway, let's get back into the actual movie, shall we? Kim begins to interrogate Scott on why he's dating Knives, so when she says this iconic line,
Scott, if your life had a face, I would punch it.
Yeah. Wait, what?
I mean, are you really happy or are you really evil?
Like, do I have ulterior motives or something? I'm offended, Kim.
Wounded even?
Hurt, Kim.
You? Hurt?
Neil, you were saying about she seems awesome?
Yeah, she seems awesome.
Yeah.
she's actually asking, are you really moving on from Envy, or are you just using Knives to keep yourself busy until you find another girl? Questioning the authenticity of the relationship and his happiness as a whole. Her calling Scott evil is meaning to say that if the relationship is indeed one-sided, Scott will be using Knives as a crutch for his happiness, which is pretty evil. Obviously, it's said in her classic snarky and sarcastic attitude, but she's actually really warning Scott to really think through about what he's doing to Knives and reconsider the relationship as a whole. Scott outright denies Kim's claims of using Knives, and Kim pushes further. Scott keeps denying and changes the subject back to how Knives is awesome, which she is. Knives solos every main, side character, anyone literally overall in the film, books, whatever, it doesn't matter, Knives solos. She is my queen. During this scene, young Neil is playing on the computer, when Kim first interrogates Scott and he doesn't realize at first, the Windows XP notification sound plays to basically notify Scott that Kim is warning him about his possible future with knives. A second sound plays, the hardware disconnect from, again, Windows XP, indicating that Scott is disconnecting from that conversation because he's scared of facing the truth. This kind of attention to detail is what makes the movie so amazing. Putting little hints at what characters are thinking and feeling in sound effects is so cool and makes the film so much better than what it would be without it. This is also done in the opening scene, but with sound effects from Legend of Zelda instead. You can hear the opening sound from A Link to the Past just after the narrator finishes the smallest prologue ever. A whistle sound effect from Ocarina of Time is heard when Scott's stat screen pops up. The classic overworld song from Zelda 1 is heard throughout the kitchen sequence. When Scott says knives is Chinese, the secret sound effect is heard, and when Scott opens the door to reveal knives, the item fanfare is played. This is all because young Neil is playing A Link to the Past for the Game Boy Advance on his DS Lite. This is detail at its finest. The next scene introduces Wallace Wells. Fun fact, he's gay. But they let you know through the dialogue instead of putting it through the stat screen, which comes up with every major character except for 8 of them. This was done on purpose because introducing it through the stat screen would have reduced him to just a caricature of a gay person. But introducing it through this shot...
Before you hear some dirty lies from someone else, yes, I'm dating a 17-year-old.
Oh, is he cute?
Ha ha ha.
Does this mean we have to stop sleeping together?
See another bed in here?
It establishes Wallace's character in a more authentic and fluent fashion. Okay, let's break down the next set of shots. Wallace stands up, whips out his flip phone to start texting. The camera moves with Wallace and stops when Scott is in the center. Wallace walks out of the shot, and just behind Scott appears graphic text of the phone behind him ringing. There is a lot of onomatopoeia in this film due to the emulation of the style of the comic books, and in this case, it's indicating to the viewer that the phone is behind Scott, which is where he looks at the end of the shot. The camera cuts to the phone on the futon, and in the background of the shot, the viewer can see Wallace entering the bathroom through the door to the side of Scott. As Scott picks up the phone, the scene changes to him and Stacy, his younger sister, who was the one ringing him. As Stacy reintroduces Wallace as the one who texted her about knives, the half of the screen that was occupied with Stacy scrolls away to make way for Wallace to be back in frame, where Scott yells at him. Wallace hangs up and Stacy moves back to occupy the second half of the screen. It's better that the camera was held onto Wallace moving instead of cutting back and forth between him and Scott, because if the filmmakers had done that, it would have made the scene a whole lot more clunky and the viewer would have been disoriented. And if the shot of the phone was just of the phone instead of Wallace being in the background and going into the bathroom, the viewer would have missed out on context that would have made the joke better later on. To transition to the next scene after the phone call between Scott and Stacy, a big bee slides from the right of the shot and the camera moves in the opposite direction to it. A bell chime is heard and the lonely bee turns into a... The scene blurs between two shots and unblurs to show a sky and sun. The R's begin to become smaller to introduce the source of the sound, a school, where the camera falls down from the sky to show Scott and Wallace waiting at the gate of the school for knives. Even though it is cheaper and more efficient to just cut between each shot for a scene, it makes the movie a whole lot more boring because these transitions are amazing and keep the audience interested in the movie. The montage that happens just after Scott and Knives finish playing Ninja Ninja Revenge reaffirms my point. It's a lot smoother to take your time with transitions and let the audience absorb the information before going into the next shot instead of just cutting it between each of them. For the montage that I'm talking about, they use a person walking in front of the camera, completely wiping the screen, then changing the shot after the person moves past the camera to go into a new scene altogether. During the walking montage, there's foreshadowing to Scott's very near future. Not subtle at all, but it doesn't really have to be. Everyone who's read the books, which is the movie's target audience anyway, already knows what's going to happen. Smooth transitioning to his quote-unquote dream, but this is where I finally give some criticism to my favorite film ever. What the hell is this pacing? The movie goes from 0 to 100 really quick. At least in the books, they sort of world built a little bit before leaning the reader into everything that the characters are able to do. But nope, 10 minutes in, Scott is already meeting the girl of his dreams in his mind. Like seriously, at least buy me a drink first before loading all this stuff onto. Anyway, that's it for this month. I didn't really have enough time to do the entire movie for this video this month, so it's going to be split into parts, most likely 3. So next month should be either part 2 or another video entirely, and if it's the latter case, then the month afterwards will be part 2. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you guys liked the video, subscribe if you want to see part 2. Yeah, that's all. Bye, not makeup.